Hello again, grown black folks talk. We're out here in the womb of the night, far out again today, because we're going to talk about some concepts that are uncommon for the black community in the United States of America. Living in and building rooms of honor. There's a lot of terms I need to define. But the first thing I need to define is because of African American history, because of 250 years of enslavement, 246 years technically of enslavement, followed by about another 100 years of Jim Crow, we still retain some of the habits of a group of people that was groomed to have zero boundaries because it is impossible for me to overestimate the level to which human agency was broken down. Our ancestors had their human agency broken down by the cruel individuals who dare to say that they own these human beings. It is not possible for me to overestimate the damage of not being able to choose your location, not being able to choose your activities, not being able to be paid by your labor, not being able to participate in any of the profit, not being able to be able to choose your living conditions, what you will wear, what you will eat, what you will drink, whether you will live or die that day based on how someone else felt. No boundaries in terms of your body and the sanctity of your body, whether it be from violence or sexual violence. You had no ability to protect your children from going through these things. You had no ability to be able to lay up anything for your children. You had no ability to do any of this. You had no choice over whether you would be allowed to reproduce or not. It is not possible for me to overestimate the extent to which every human boundary, to even have your own name and your own language and your own culture, there's no way for me to overestimate the extent to which our ancestors were stripped of all human boundaries. But we can estimate how severe it is based on how we still struggle with this as African Americans among each other. Because if you don't have it, you don't have it. All discussions of honor require understanding what are we honoring and what are we talking about. And unfortunately, because of what happened to us, dignity and respect was very little a part of our experience. We had to fight for every inch, both in slavery and immediately afterwards. Our ancestors, rather, not us, because we're talking about what we can do today. I have to remember to connect to we're not trauma bonding with our ancestors, but we are acknowledging they had to fight for every inch of human dignity that they had. They had to fight for things that we take for granted. If I want my name not to be Deanne tomorrow, I can go to the proper place and change it. Back then, my ancestors could have their name changed by every single person that ever bought them. To even be able to call yourself by your own name was not possible. And so it makes sense that we, their descendants, really struggle with having a code of our own and having boundaries and determining what human dignity and what honor is. It makes sense that we would struggle with that. It also has to do with the fact that because of what happened to us, and even today, the United States prides itself on being a land of freedom. But any Native American or person of African descent can tell you that for millions of people for hundreds of years, the United States was violently authoritarian and genocidal. That's just a fact. There's no point in arguing about it. This information is available as Google, and the people who did it recorded it themselves. So having the authority to not only to create, but to enforce a code of honor even among your own members. Because there are too many people that did not want you to feel that you had any authority. This is still to a point, still with us. If you're not paying attention, authoritarianism is creeping back into the United States. The main thing is every time we have made any attempt to police and defend ourselves, that has been disrupted. And now we're in the 1970s. We're now 50 years back. We're not 150 years back. the Black Panthers and the Deacons of Defense. Now, the Black Panthers certainly had their own problems. But for the purposes of this discussion, what I'm talking about is, okay, you have been groomed to have weak boundaries, and you do not have an internal way to do enforcement because there are people interested in you feeling like you have absolutely no power and they have it all. So this is not a discussion that we normally have. However, Shantae Charles of Black Table Talk, and that's over on Facebook. I'm going to find the Facebook link and I'm going to put it into the description, because if you like discussions of issues that are on the level that we do here, you will find them with Miss Charles on her personal Facebook page. And also, I believe Black Table Talk is also on Periscope, I'm sorry, Telegram and Periscope. But I'm going to link you to those Facebook pages so you can actually check that out for yourself. If you like conversations on this level, you will enjoy that if you're on Facebook or Periscope. Okay, so she was talking about showing up in places of honor and being a person who lives that kind of life. And I really started thinking about, okay, what does that mean in the environment that we find ourselves in? If most people are coming from a situation of not knowing how to find those boundaries, not knowing what dignity looks like, struggling to still find a way back to that. And I don't know if it's most people, but it's just kind of watching our behavior, having been in the community, working in the community since I was 16, and being raised by people who are in the community, and just watching what happens in church and community, and then looking around online. Yeah, it looks like we're struggling a little bit to find a way back to dignity post crack cocaine having come in, post the breaking up of the family with the earlier things of drugs, and post manufacturing jobs being taken away from Black men. There seems to be a struggle going on. So if you are not in the power position, and we're not, according to all the stats in the United States of America, a lot of other people have power and money at our expense. We're not at the top of any of those lists. What do? Well, I found a potential answer. Sometimes, I mean, there are content creators talking about a code that we need to get on code. The problem is nobody can really agree on what they are, and a lot of them are Black men who think going back to the 1950s is the code we need to get on. Well, if that had been good, we wouldn't be. Okay, if the code in the 1950s was working, our great grandfathers would not have been trying so hard to be integrated. There would have been no need for that. So apparently that was not working because they threw everything they had from 1950 away to integrate. Banks, insurance, churches that actually were doing stuff in the community. There are still a few, don't get me wrong, they're out there. But I'm just saying, the church is a powerful institution in Black life. That went away. All that was thrown away. So if it was working, if we want to go back to the 1950s, then why did your great grandfathers throw it away? Nobody seems to have an answer for that. Nobody can agree to be on code. And Neely Fuller Jr., who talked about the compensatory code, I can't remember the whole name of the book right now, but Neely, Neely Fuller Jr., you can go Google that, talked about it's very hard for us to enforce a code when we do not have a lot of real authority in a racist system. So what do you do when you're defeated? Well, there's an answer for this. I'm not saying that we are defeated, but there's an answer from a man who was. I talked about slave owners. Well, there's one particular one who ended up being head of a college after the Civil War. And when Robert E. Lee was defeated at Appomattox and became head of a college, he came to a college that had 50 students left, meaning Washington College had almost as many board members as it had students. The ratio was like 1 in 5. And they're trying to build their institution up to its former glory. The Union Army had come through there and taken away everything that was not nailed down. Colonel Hunter had ripped them a new one, because next door, the Virginia Military Institute turned out all of its students to go join the Confederate Army, and Colonel Hunter came down there and said, "Oh, I bet you won't." And then went next door to Washington College. They weren't even in it, and went and tore them up too because they were right there next door. They had 50 students. The Union Army had taken everything that wasn't nailed down. The Confederate dollar was worth nothing. So these people up here talking about all the stuff they want, they're going to do this, and they're going to do that. And Robert E. Lee came along and said, "No, we're not going to do any of that because we can't do any of that. We're going to simplify this code. We're going to go ahead and say one rule, because this is what we can enforce. to act as a gentleman at all times. We just have one rule. To this day, W&L University, which used to be Washington and Lee, till that became politically incorrect, has one rule. I'm sure they have more, and I'll get into why. To act with honor at all times. I'm sure they have a code of conduct. Why? Because times have changed. They're not living under a situation where the South was divided essentially up into conquered colonies for another 12 years. Jim Crow was not fun for the defeated Southerners either. And so, of course, Reconstruction was not fun for them. Therefore, they took it out on us during Jim Crow. But they were not free during that time. You had to sign loyalty oaths, and the South had to agree to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments before they were allowed back into the Union to have the rights of United States citizens. So the entire Confederate Army was on parole. The Ulysses S. Grant's Justice Department existed to snatch up Confederate soldiers who were not on their parole and were being in things called the KKK. Robert E. Lee himself lived under the threat of being hung till 1869, like every other year. There was 1866, 1867, till Grant was elected, there was a threat of him being snatched up out of his home and hung. So when you're in a situation like that, and they conveniently lost his loyalty oath, he did sign it. They conveniently lost it for 110 years. So when you know that you have no power relative to the society around you, you simplify codes to where you can actually handle them. And that became the code. We just have one. Behave with honor at all times. And that was enough for him to run that college and to get it back from the brink. His son took over after his death, and W&L University is still here. So you got stripped to the studs. All your people want to go back to their former glory. And a man comes in and says, no, we defeated. We can't do all that. Let's simplify it to what we can actually do. We can't have this and have that and have this and have that right now. Let's simplify it back to what we can do. Now, we cannot use the old Southern Gentleman Code. And even time was out even then. Because, the lifestyle of the Southern gentleman depended on slavery. But everybody kind of knew what this was. And so it could still be enforced, but it won't work for us as Black people. That code won't work for us because it depended on us being enslaved. The gentleman code used by Northern Europeans, well, Europeans in general this time, have been designed in the mercantile period because old nobles did not want the new money people marrying their daughters, so they agreed among themselves that if you could not hold up this code, you could not be part of their family. And that is where we get the codes for gentlemen that we know about today, to distinguish themselves from the common men who were getting money. Notice that there is an enforcement element, though. These were the nobles of Europe. So they were able to enforce it. So they could have a long, extended code. And so Lee came along and said, we don't have manpower to do any of that. All of us are on parole. So no, we're going to go ahead and simplify this down. As African Americans, we do not have, at this particular moment, the capitalistic and political authority we need to be able to enforce like a noble in Europe would. So perhaps the reason it's hard for us to find a code to adhere to is that we're trying to do too much. So maybe when we talk about being a person who can live in and build rooms of honor, what exactly are we talking about? Maybe we're talking about something very simple that each of us can actually do, which is honor one another's humanity. Which actually would be us reclaiming what was taken from our ancestors. Because what was the attack on our ancestors? The attack on their humanity. The fact that they too reflected the image of God and were made by him in the womb. The fact that they too were entitled to life, liberty, to be paid for their labor, to be treated with human dignity and respect, that they were allowed a right to their own thoughts and their own opinion and room and to their own personhood. The simplest thing here is really the final frontier for us. Humans are flawed, but no human being is a judge over any other because we're just human beings. And see, a room like this, a theoretical room like this, requires strong boundaries. Because when we talk about grace, and we talk about kindness, and we talk about fairness, you have to understand that there's a whole lot of people who want to get on the tit and just suck up resources from anything they run into. You put them in a nice place and they're going to destroy it by sucking it up. And then you have people that only understand their sense of self and human dignity by looking down on other people. They too will wreck a room like that. So there are people that you have to keep out of a room like that. So you must have strong boundaries and you must have strong enforcement. In other words, in order to make this work, you have to come of the mind of honoring people's humanity and find your way to people of the same mind, or build a room so that other people of the same mind can come to you. And obviously, we're going to be growing in this process, since again, in the African American community, this is the one thing that we have been denied: the ability to be fully human, to not be pressed into someone else's box for their profit, to be seen as who we actually are. This is the final frontier, but it's also the simplest thing to do. But it's just that everybody then has to purge themselves of the idea that, okay, great resources, let me compensate for my trauma by, attempting to fill up on what everybody else has bought here. And I've been so traumatized, I'm not obligated to do anything for anybody else. Or I have achieved a certain position, and because of this, I ought to be allowed to have more privileges and more entitlement, and to look down on other people and to keep them in their place. We have to purge ourselves from these attitudes to be able. But then again, we have to allow people to heal. There are time periods in which people just need to be left alone and to heal and to be loved on, to be nourished back to life. This is true. And there are people who are attempting to learn humility, but that is a process. And so we have to have enough grace in a room of honor to allow people to understand that being wrong is a human process too. And as long as people are making progress, to give them room. This is a tough assignment. This is a tough assignment in the United States of America because, again, you're in an environment where you have pretty much everybody out there who puts on airs that they're superior to Black people in America. And statistically, by economic standards, that's correct. But one of the reasons that these communities are more successful is because most of them have retained enough of their culture to have a sense of a code of honor. They did not have every single thing removed from their ancestors. We may not, like I said, because you have to look at relative strength. We may, like I said, we may not be able to do an extensive code like many other undisturbed cultures have. But I don't know if it's necessary either, because the simplest thing is to reclaim your humanity, which is sometimes effective. Now, again, the necessity of strong boundaries. Humanity can be unbelievably degenerate and depraved. So it is necessary to maintain a room of honor. It must have exceptionally strong boundaries. And if you can't find one, then sometimes you have to build one. This channel is a proto room of honor. This is why certain conversations are simply not allowed here. We do not, and we will not, take whole segments of humanity. I respect everyone's personal opinion and experiences, but there are certain conversations we're not going to have here. We're not going to write off millions and millions of human beings. I don't care who they are. We will not do that here. That does not comport with honoring the humanity of people. People have to be taken one by one, at least in a public setting. Now, I'm not talking about what people do, but here we will not do that for that reason. Here, you can't even leave a comment with certain words on this page. I have already pre-selected them, and I have already told YouTube don't even. Certain people who I have seen acting a fool in other environments cannot even be posted on this page. They may see their comments, but no one else ever will. They have been pre-blocked. I do not need you to come here and act a fool for me to know. Now, I said act a fool. I don't know if that's your entire existence, but I also know that people sometimes get online and we forget ourselves. I mean, I have to check myself. Y'all don't know. I write comments in some places and be like, the spirit's like, no, you ain't gonna post that. I'm a human being too. Being wrong is part of the journey and the process. If I ever choose to go live, all my moderators will know at that time. If you don't come in here knowing how to behave yourself with honor, you're not going to sit around here and learn at our expense. If you do not know how to act when you come in, you will leave swiftly. And see, this is what happens when you decide, and some of you already know, if you decide you want drama and you want mess, that is a dishonorable environment. I will not be there. That's been my attitude. But that's people know offline. Play with me if you want to. I try to be the same person everywhere. I just, I left the online community just the other day because they want to pal around with someone who said, I like my buttons the way I like my women, easy or mentally ill. I'm like, I'm not only gonna leave you and you out, I'm leaving your whole community. Because if they laughed at that, I don't need to be here. Bye. And then I left everything associated with them. I don't play about that. Because again, the first person you have to have strong boundaries with is actually you. If you only intend to be in rooms of honor, then you only intend to be in rooms of honor. And then you can find more and then you can build them, which really goes back to where we are. As I said at the beginning, a lot of us were groomed to have weak boundaries. A lot of us were groomed to be tolerant of people who do not honor our humanity, who do not think we should have agency. And we have to get healed first. As a woman, I'm not going to tolerate that. Therefore, I don't have to spend my time being in rooms that behave that way, and I know what kind of room I need to be in where my humanity as a woman is honored. Theoretically, a little hope. Theoretically. Well, not even theoretically. It is my pleasure to be involved with people and communities that are building these. My church is doing its best. Our nonprofit arms are doing their best. There's some online communities I'm involved in that are doing their best. And we're all learning this together. Theoretically, if such things become a concept that we pursue, and there is evidence, at least there's evidence that this is happening, it's slow. These would be rooms in which people could heal and become strong and become profitable collaborators. And I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about people that learn that they can build and they can grow and they can contribute. And in such rooms, Black women could come together and heal of the things that they need to heal from as Black women. Black men could come together in such rooms and heal and grow and be healed of things they need to be healed of. And then eventually in rooms of honor, Black men and Black women could find each other and create healed families of honor, which then could associate and rebuild the community. Theoretically possible. Theoretically possible. And I have experienced a little bit of this. And there's always a little bit more work to do across racial lines. But if we have finally got it settled that we're not going to look down on one another because of different skin color and different culture and all the rest, theoretically, in one of these rooms, people can come together and we can stop arguing about things that have been made to matter artificially, but in the grand schemes of things do not. And then you begin to see people of all different races, sizes, colors, and cultures coming together and doing powerful things. The Hive blockchain has pockets of honor like this. The whole thing is not like this. Every other day I have, every other year, every so many months, I have to remind some people, excuse me, try it again. I got to drop a dime on someone tomorrow. You did what now? Oh, yeah, you gonna back up off of that. You gonna back up off of that. So no, not everybody's honorable, but there are pockets of honor. And I spend time in there. There's all kind of people in there. We're able to do amazing things together. It is a privilege For me to be able to be with people who use the internet for international rescue missions. I get to do that in 2 different places. Because when you finally get to the point that you can operate as a productive member, as a productive, honorable person, then you get to operate like this. You know, you get to talk to people who see the humanity of people that don't have to be just like them. They don't have to grift. They don't have to step on and look down on. You finally get to be human, a powerful human with powerful humans. This is actually more than theoretically possible. But it is something you have to set course for, which is why we got the far out boom of the night background. Because what we're talking about is possibilities that can be born into your world in 2023. Again, as African Americans, enforcement power is low. We can really do what we can do for ourselves. So I thought for you in 2023, seek to be a person of honor who seeks to move and be welcome in and to contribute to rooms of honor. And if you can't find anything, maybe build one. And with that, you will learn to have strong boundaries to keep people who want to grift and want to step on out. People will not always understand. But it's like I said on another video, the way of the beacon builder is hard anyway. That's a whole different video that I did. I think I'll add that to the description, which is another way of looking at it. The way of the beacon builder is hard anyway. Why not take on, if it's going to be hard, why not take on everything that goes with that and cultivate honor around you, in you first, and then around you? Why not? Since it's going to be hard anyway, why not get everything that can be gotten from it? And as I say, we will define honor as respecting other people's humanity. Think about everything that white slave owners did to African Americans and do the exact opposite. Build people in their humanity, respect their humanity. And again, new conversation for African Americans. Conversations not even possible on a large scale 100 years ago or 200 years ago. It's still new information for us, which is why I've taken this time. And if you've stayed and you've walked through this with me, I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day and goodbye.